So you've decided to buy a house. You found your realtor, you've got your loan officer, and you found the perfect property. What's next? I'm Jeremy James with Lifestyle Real Estate. Welcome to our 6-part series on buying a home here in Central Kentucky. So you've done all these things. You've gotten pre-approved. You found your realtor. You've gone out and looked at all kinds of houses. You found exactly what you wanted. The house is exactly your dream home. So what's next? Well, now we submit our offer. When we look at how to submit an offer, what we're going to actually put in, a lot of that is going to be determined by your realtor and their local knowledge about what the market is actively doing. If you're in a seller's market, how competitive is this area in comparison with others? I've gone through sellers markets where certain neighborhoods would go $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 over list price, and yet outside of some of those areas, we're negotiating and I'm getting $4,000 and $5,000 off and paid closing costs by sellers, all in the same time frame, just within different areas. So that's why a lot of that local knowledge is very important. So you don't overpay, right? Because none of us want to overpay. So when we submit our offer, that local knowledge, having to know what's really going on and doing that research. So a lot of that you're going to rely on that realtor for. Have them do a comparative market analysis on that property. Yes, I know sometimes time is short and you got to get that offer in quickly. At least have them review the numbers. Ask me to review those numbers for you to make sure that they're in line. Sometimes we'll be able to see a lot of those will be right in line with each other. Other times you're going to want to take a look and you're going to want to make sure. So that's why we need to make sure that we've got local knowledge and experience on our side before we even start putting our numbers together. The next thing we're going to want to look at is earnest money. What is earnest money? Well, earnest money is the good faith deposit put down by a buyer to show a seller that they have a vested interest in this property and aren't just throwing contracts and offers around everywhere hoping something sticks. In Central Kentucky, that earnest money stays with the buyer's broker and does not go to the seller until closing. And it's really difficult for the seller to actually get that money. Usually has to something has to happen, like the buyer has to default or break the contract, and that's about the only way. Sometimes it can be that the contract is in the process have been delayed so long that the seller asks for compensation for how amount of time that's been on if the deal doesn't go through, and sometimes it can be forfeited that way. But most of the times, as long as that contract, even if it breaks, isn't defaulted on, where the contract hasn't been broken, an agreement hasn't been broken, then that money will go back to the buyer. So your earnest money can tell a lot to the seller, how interested you are, how invested you are in this property. If I see a $100 earnest money deposit on a $300,000 home, I'm not taking that really seriously about the buyer's interest in locking in and getting our attention for that property. If I see a $10,000 earnest money deposit on a $300,000 home, that is getting my attention. So you want to keep those things in consideration. A lot of times on the listing side of things, I look for about 1% of the purchase price. That shows me that the buyer is well funded, that they've got what they need to do, and they're showing me that they're serious about purchasing the home. The next thing you're going to want to decide, what type of inspections are you going to get? A lot of the stuff that is typical are they will get a home inspection and they'll get a pest inspection. However, that's not the limit of the inspections that you can get. If you want a full electrical inspection, a chimney inspection, if you want the property survey, whatever that looks like to you, those can be negotiated in there. But normally what we do is we check complete property in the inspections and then how many days we have to get it done. Now, as the buyer, these costs are your costs. If you want all these inspections, then you're going to pay all those inspectors. Now, when you get those inspection reports back, those are your reports. Nobody else can get those reports unless you give them over to them. So keep that in mind, okay? Because a lot of sellers will try and ask for them. If you don't want to give them up, you don't have to, because they're not theirs. They're yours. After we consider inspections, then we're going to also look at appraisals. Are you doing cash? Are you so comfortable with the area and the amount that you're paying for the property that you're willing to waive the appraisal for the value of the property? If so, fine, we can do that. Actually had lenders who have waived appraisal because the property is in line with the the other properties in the area. It doesn't happen often, but it certainly does happen. So we need to consider appraisals. If you're in a tight seller's market, then that may be something we have to look at removing. I don't mind removing appraisals when we have good, strong comparative sales next door that we can look at and say, yep, the value is there. But what I don't like to do is waive those inspections. We can talk about that more later. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have the pre-approval letter that we can submit, or if you're buying cash, proof of funds letter. I know it's a little awkward, it's a little wonky. You can redact the account numbers and all that kind of good stuff, but we need to see your name, the purchaser's name, and we need to see totals on that cash on hand. It's not in an IRA, it's not in a retirement account or an investment account or anything like that. This needs to be cash money on hand as proof of funds, because sometimes that money can be in an IRA or a retirement account and be locked up and not able to be gotten to. This needs to be cash money on hands for proof of funds. Some realtors on the listing side will accept that I have reviewed the proof of funds and that it's sufficient for the closing. Others will want to see it for themselves. So and be able to show the seller those proof of funds before accepting a cash offer. So keep that in mind. Know that that's probably going to come up if you're coming in with a cash offer. Then we want to look at what kind of contingencies and everything else we're going to have. Do you have a property that you need to sell first? Are there certain things you want or to come back to you? Are you going to be asking the seller to pay a portion of your closing costs? All of that is going to be in those contingencies at the end. Are there certain things that you want the seller to perform to make right? Whether it's repairs, whether it's needed things that are to be done to the property, whether it's a blacktop or whatever contingency that looks like. In buyers markets, strong buyers markets, your latitude is a lot more on those contingencies. In a strong sellers market, those contingencies get really, really thin, really, really quick, and the cleanest offer will have zero contingencies. That's in a really strong seller's market that those contingencies will almost be non-existent. One of the other things that we're going to need to consider, whether, especially depending on the market, whether it's a heavy seller's market, is whether we're going to go in with an escalation clause. What an escalation clause is a lot like the way eBay works. eBay, somebody will put something on there for $20, but everybody knows it's probably going to go over $20, or you feel that you would be willing to pay up to $40. The next bid comes in over $20, and it moves your bid up to $21. And then $23, and then $24, blah, 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 up to your max of $40. That's what an escalation clause is. It immediately and automatically moves your price up depending upon the next highest offer underneath it until we are maxed or till they pass us up. And that's what an escalation clause is. Now, a lot of times in Central Kentucky, what sellers will do is they will accept that top number on that escalation clause, how high it was pushed, but others have been getting a little bit savvy with this, other sellers, and they've been coming back and counter-offering at that top number. The reality is, as a buyer, if you don't want to pay that top number, you don't have to, and you can walk away and they can be left hanging. What that's going to do is that's going to drop them down to the next highest, which is where just under where you were, and they're going to actually cost themselves money. It's a decent try, but doesn't always work. And if you're not willing to go up there without necessity, you don't have to. So consider that with your escalation clauses. All right, so once we have our offer all put together, whether it's the amount, it's the earnest money, it's the inspections and appraisals, contingencies, whether we're doing an escalation clause, we've got that pre-approval, or we've got that proof of funds. There's a few other forms that your realtor that I'm going to ask you to sign, some stuff, disclosure forms and all that kind of stuff going in, and then we go ahead and we submit that offer on your behalf. Once that offer is submitted, then I'm going to call the agent. I'm going to discuss with them the entire offer. I'm going to explain to them all the details and what our thinking is on each one, discuss the pre-approval, discuss the proof of funds, etc., etc. We're going to go through the whole thing and make sure that they know full well what our offer looks like, and then they're going to take that to their seller, and they should be negotiating that or presenting that without any delay. Now, There may be an announced delay where the seller has said, I'm only going to be looking at offers until such and such a date, or I'm going to hold all offers and look at them all at such and such a date. But most of that has to be declared prior to, and we know going in if we're going to have to wait a couple days. If we have a deadline like that, sometimes we need to look and say on the buy side, if the deadline is 48 hours away, maybe we hold our offer until later and submit late so they don't use our offer against us with somebody else. So we want to watch that. However, that can backfire on us because then they could always accept an offer before even that deadline, and then we're pretty much out. Anyway, so those are some negotiations and some tactics and everything that we see out there, some things to just pay attention to. So once we get our offer, we submit it, I call, discuss the offer, we go through it, and then it's fingers crossed. Hopefully they come back with either a counter offer or just a, hey, we accepted your offer. And then we're on to the next step. I'm Jeremy James with Lifestyle Real Estate. Stay tuned for the next step in the home buying process here in Central Kentucky.